picturesque village of Blair Athol is situated in Highland Perthshire, right in the middle of Scotland, where the River Tilt joins the River Garry. The white painted walls of Blair Castle, seat of the Dukes of Athol, can be seen from afar. The oldest part of the castle dates from 1269, but over the centuries the building has been added to, including in the 1860s the addition of a grand ballroom. There are many things to catch the eye in the ballroom. Beautiful paintings, suits of chainmail, weaponry, stag's antlers, banners. But in pride of place is an oil painting of a fiddle player, Neil Gow. Neil Gow lived over 200 years ago, yet his name and his music live on. The portrait by Sir Henry Raeburn was commissioned by the Duke of Athol, testament to the high esteem in which he held Gow. And Gow and his music are still highly regarded. But what were his inspirations? The glorious landscape in which he lived, the people he encountered during his long life. Our story begins a few miles south, near the historic village of Dunkeld. Situated on the left bank of the River Tay, about 15 miles north of the city of Perth, the name Dunkeld means Fort of the Celts, harking back to its ancient past. Centuries ago, Dunkeld was the religious capital of Scotland, and it boasts a cathedral dating from the 13th century. Across the river from the cathedral is the wee village of Inver. Situated where the River Bran joins the River Tay. In fact, the name Inver actually means river mouth and is often followed by the name of the river. It was in this beautiful part of Scotland that fiddler Neil Gow spent his long life. He was born on the 22nd of March 1727, not in fact in Inver but in Claypots, an even smaller cluster of dwellings a mile or so upstream. However, he was still very much an infant when the family moved down to the village of Inver, to this cottage in fact, which was to become Neil's home for the rest of his very long life. His father, John, was a plaid weaver, a handloom weaver. His mother, Catherine McEwen, came from a family reputed to have been clarsach players. The clarsach is a small Celtic harp, at one time more commonly seen in the traditional music scene than even the fiddle. Perhaps that's where some of his inspiration came from. The village of Inver exists because of the River Bran. Its power was harnessed to drive the mills, meal mills, sawmills and lint mills, processing the flax grown in nearby fields. It was also a very important stopping off place for people travelling north or south and needing to cross the River Tay. In the 17th century there were two ferries at Dunkeld, the East Ferry and the West Ferry. But people arriving at Inver, perhaps too late to take the ferry, would stay over in the inn. It is not certain who or what inspired Neil to take up the fiddle. There may well have been, on occasion, the strains of music emanating from the pub, within earshot of the young Neil. It is known that he did get lessons from a man called John Cameron, who worked for the Stuarts of Grantley and lived at Tomgarrow, a short distance from Inver. By the time he was 17 years old, Neil had become a proficient fiddler. In 1745, he won a prestigious fiddle competition in Perth, and that same year played for Bonnie Prince Charlie, Prince Charles Edward Stuart, and his entourage at Dunkeld House. Neil Gow's fame was quick to spread, and the Duke and Duchess of Atholl engaged his talents for entertaining visitors to the castle. For this he was paid the princely sum of £5 a year. There are few accounts of his playing, but one of those remarks on his propensity for using the up-driven bow, an unusual and somewhat awkward technique, but very effective in emphasising the snap rhythm in strathspeys. I'll demonstrate using this fiddle. This, once upon a time, belonged to Neil Gow and permanently lives here in the castle. Here's a strathspey composed by Neil Gow, Welcome Whisky Back Again. Now, the account of Neil's style mentions the up-driven bow, and it also mentions him lifting the bow from the string with a quick flick of the wrist. But instead of the down, up, down movement of the bow, Neil was inclined to do down, up, up. Let me play the tune. The up-driven bow. An old oak by the River Tay is purported to be where Gow would sometimes sit and play his fiddle, and on occasion watch the Duke fishing for salmon. Neil's regular performing companion was his younger brother Donald, who played the cello, or bass fiddle, as it was often called. This two-piece combination may often have been augmented by the addition of other fiddlers, perhaps one or more of his sons, and in his later years, Samson Duncan of Kincleven, who was 40 years Neil's junior. Neil Gow was married twice. His first wife, Margaret Wiseman, was mother to the family. 5 sons, William, John, Andrew, Nathaniel and Daniel, although Daniel died as an infant. And also 2 daughters, Margaret and Grisel, all born between 1751 and 1765. Neil's first wife, Margaret, died just a year after her young son, Daniel. The 4 surviving sons all learned to play, and all of them went on to pursue musical careers. John and Andrew in London, William and Nathaniel in Edinburgh. Incidentally, Neil always spelled his name I before E, very possibly an abbreviation of Nathaniel. Thus, the music of Scotland and Perthshire and the style of Neil Gow reached far beyond their place of origin. Nathaniel Gow born in 1763, spent the greater part of his working life in Edinburgh, performing at recitals and dances, or assemblies, as once they were called, and of course teaching and composing. After the death of his older brother William in 1791, he succeeded him as leader of a popular Edinburgh dance band. In terms of composing, Nathaniel was even more prolific than his father, and importantly, he also ventured into music publishing. This ensured the survival of many tunes which might otherwise have been lost. Sadly, tragedy and misfortune dogged Nathaniel. The death of his son, Neil Jr., at the early age of 28, an unwise investment in a coal mining venture, and finally a stroke, leaving him unable to earn a living, meant that he died in poverty and was buried here in Greyfriars Kirkyard, but probably in the same plot as his son. Nathaniel's son, Neil Gow Jr., born in 1795, was a qualified doctor as well as a fiddler. And when he returned from his studies in Paris, he spent time in Edinburgh working with his father in the music business on Princes Street. He also collaborated with the writer and poet James Hogg, the Ettrick Shepherd. They produced a couple of songs still remembered today, Lament for Flora MacDonald and Come Ye by Athol. But Neil didn't just teach his sons. He had other pupils. It's very probable that one of those was Robert Mackintosh of Tullymet, a small village not far from the village of Inver. Born in 1745, Mackintosh would have grown up very much aware of the famous musician who lived just a few miles down the valley. Like many musicians of the time, including Neil Gow's sons, Robert Mackintosh eventually moved south to Edinburgh in order to pursue a career in music. Also in the ballroom is a large oil painting by Sir Edwin Landseer, Death of a Stag in Glentote, which features John Crerar, head stalker for the Duke and one-time pupil of Neil Gow. The Duke paid for the lessons when Crerar was but a lad, looking to the future and a time when Neil Gow might not be able. Neil Gow's last pupil was James Mackintosh, a young lad who lived with his family in the cottage across the lane from Neil Gow. 3 generations later, his grandnephew and namesake, along with local school teacher Miss Davina Begg, founded the Dunkeldan District Strathspey and Reel Society, which is still going strong. Without doubt, one of the most famous Scots of the 18th century was our native bard, Robert or Rabbie Burns. During a tour of the Highlands in 1787, Burns made a point of visiting his musical hero, Neil Gow. They first met in the former rectory near Dunkeld Cathedral, and then adjourned to Gow's cottage across the river. It must have been a happy occasion, with stories, verses, tunes, and no doubt a dram or two. Burns was a fiddler, by no means as accomplished as Gow, but he had a good enough ear to acquire a few melodies which he subsequently used for his songs. Major Graham of Inchbrakie was the air preferred by Burns for My Love Is Like a Red, Red Rose, and Neil Gow's lamentation for James Murray, Esquire of Abercairny, became the melody for Where Braving Angry Winter's Storms. Neil Gow married his second wife, Margaret Urquhart, in 1768, 2 years after the death of his first wife. She remained his companion up until her death in 1805. His lament for her is arguably Neil Gow's most poignant and beautiful composition. Neil Gow died on the 1st of March, 1807, just 3 weeks before his 80th birthday. At the time of his death, Telford's Great Bridge over the Tay at Dunkeld was under construction. In fact, the real Dunkeld Bridge was Neil Gow's final composition. Neil Gow is buried in the churchyard of Little Dunkeld, along with both his wives and his son Andrew. Little Dunkeld now merges with Burnham, which is a much younger village. It evolved with the arrival of the railway in 1856. Other fiddlers interred at Little Dunkeld include James Mackintosh, whose grave isn't marked, his brother Charles, the Perthshire naturalist, Ron Gonella, a more recent fiddler from Crieff, and fiddlemaker Duncan MacDonald, who was originally from the Isle of Egg but settled in Mewthal, just to the west of Perth. The music of Neil Gow and his sons can still be heard today at ceilidhs, country dances and balls throughout Scotland and beyond. Yet until recently, there has been no obvious pointer to the fact that he ever lived here. By the late 20th century, Gow's headstone in Little Dunkeld Kirkyard was showing signs of age, but thanks to the efforts of fiddler Ron Gonella and a group of Gow enthusiasts, it was replaced with a new one in 1987. The original headstone is now in the cathedral. A metal plaque on the wall of the cottage in Inver proclaims Neil Gow's former occupancy, with a quote from a poem by Burns to commemorate a visit by Neil Gow to Dumfries. "Nae fabled wizard's wand, I trow, had e'er the magic ere a Gow, when wi' a wave he draws his bow across his wondrous fiddle." And a beautifully carved bench below Neil Gow's oak on the right bank of the Tay marks the spot where, legend has it, he would occasionally sit and play his fiddle. The bench bears an inscription, a line from Neil Gow's Apprentice, a song by Dundee's singer, the late Michael Marra, about Dunkeld fiddler and singer Dougie MacLean. "I sit beneath the fiddle tree, the ghost of Neil Gow next to me." But none of these tributes are in prominent locations. To address this, the annual Neil Gow Festival was inaugurated in 2004. The festival still happens every year, a living memorial to Gow and his significant contribution to the Scottish fiddle tradition. And income and donations from the festival eventually generated enough money to commission a memorial, a bronze sculpture by Scottish artist David Annand. It was installed on the 10th of December 2020 on the Burnham side of Dunkeld Bridge, where it greets visitors as they drive into Dunkeld from the A9, the main road between Perth and Inverness. It is indeed an eye-catching bronze, but Neil Gow's lasting legacy is his music, still loved and played 2 centuries after his passing by countless fiddlers the world over. What better testimony to this most famous son of Highland Perthshire?